So the easiest part in dealing with Julius and in making the film was he was such a willing participant. And there was never, and Julius was very much like this. Julius was a very giving individual of himself, of his photography. You know, if he would have a class of students come up to the studio, he would he's looking at these photographs and passing them around. And he used to, laugh at the Getty when they would come up. He'd always say, the Getty with their white gloves that they would put on. And they used to just, when the whole archive acquisition was happening, they would just cringe at him pulling these photographs out, because to him, they were photographs. That's what you work with. And he would pull it out and hold it really firmly and plop it on the table, and so that type of thing. So that's kind of emblematic of working with him in general. I had the keys to the studio. I could sleep in the studio anytime I wanted. Anybody that I wanted to meet, Frank Gehry. Well, let me see. He'd thumb through his Rolodex, call up Frank, Julius Schulman. Listen, my friend Eric, and tell them what we need, and we'd go down and shoot Frank Gehry. So that was the easiest part. The most difficult part in terms of working with Julius is, I don't know if it comes through, but he definitely has an ego. And he definitely, he's very opinionated. And it was difficult at times for him to let go of being behind the camera. So an example of that is, he would do this so often. He'd say, now I'm going to sit down in this chair, and I'm going to start telling you about the first photographs that I took of Richard Neutra. And then I'm going to tell you about each different image, and he would go on, and you can't stop. When Julius is talking, you can't stop him. You're interrupting me, now wait a minute. And he'd go through this whole thing, and then we would be like 5 or 10 minutes down, time spent. And then I would say, because we just had to, this would happen all the time, we'd have to let this process happen and say, okay, Julius, so, all right, let's start. You're in the chair, and let me have you start talking about those first, the 6 photographs that you did for Richard Neutra. And he would look at me and he'd say, I just told you about that. What are you talking about? And he would just go off on some tangent, and then it would all be lost. And it was almost like working with a child at times. Like he's not going to give you what you want, so you either have to think like 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead and try to kind of maneuver and strategize to get him to a certain point, or you have to take him with the lead, let him take the lead, and then listen to that and try to start extracting some of the strands that might sync up with the ideas or the things that you want to get. But it turns out, and this being my first film also, I had almost 100 hours of Julius. And not just sitting in a chair. I mean, but we had a lot of interviews. It was a very, at times, very long process to get things that we needed. With Julius and these architects, I believe it was very pure. It was very much, we believe that this type of architecture and this type of space, this is good design, this will make your life better. That's what they were about. And he was trying, he would always talk about, his medium was photography, and primarily the way to promote architecture was to get it into shelter magazines and trade publications, so that when people are flipping through the pages that they stop, like they connected with something and it made an impact. And he would always talk about, you have to incorporate everything that you see, hear, and feel in front of you into this one image to stop those page turners. And then there has to be dimension and storytelling going on, so people spend time and start to pull in. And he saw it as a form of communication, a very powerful form of communication. And I think he was doing it with very clear intentions and wanting, to promote the idea that this is good for you. So the flip side to it, which we didn't really get to investigate or express in the film, is that you start to look at consumerism and all of these things that we want, and how advertising and publicity and marketing works on us. He was a master at that. And I think in many ways he inadvertently contributed to this kind of just lust for the Southern California lifestyle, or, you know, a really nice looking couch, you know, all of these things that we want, contributing to that, you know, the wants of society. And so I just thought that was a kind of an interesting, you know, strand that we didn't get to flesh out in the film, but he did help. He was a master at communication. So like, if I had to pick one thing, like, what's the significance of his work? I think in many ways Julius really humanized architecture to project the idea of, wow, that's a really incredible looking space. I would like to live there. He was a master at that.